The River Ancholme is a river in Lincolnshire, England, and a tributary of the Humber estuary. It rises south of Bishopbridge and flows north through the market town of Brigg before flowing into the Humber at South Ferriby. It drains a significant part of northern Lincolnshire between the Trent and the North Sea. The river has been used by humans since at least 800 BCE, confirmed by the excavation of a planked boat at Brigg, and patents covering improvements to the river are known from 1287 onwards. Major change occurred in 1635, when a new straight channel was constructed from Bishopbridge to Ferriby. The new channel carries most of the water and is known as the new River Ancholme, whereas the old River Ancholme maintains its natural course, meandering from side to side. The old course is mostly reduced to a drain, except around the town of Brigg, where the two rivers create an island in the centre of Brigg known as Island Car. Further improvements were started by John Rennie in the early 1800s and completed by his son in the 1820s, with the reconstruction of Ferriby Sluice taking place around 1841. For that time onwards the river was reasonably profitable, and although receipts were reduced when railways arrived in the area, trade picked up in the 1890s and was boosted by cargoes of sugar beet in the 1930s. All commercial carrying had ceased above Brigg by the 1970s and stopped altogether in the 1980s. The upper section was almost derelict by then, but was restored and dredged in 2004. The river is an important drainage channel for North Lincolnshire, but is also used for leisure, with boating, rowing, canoeing and fishing taking place. Responsibility for the river changed 6 times between 1930 and 1996, but it is now managed by the Environment Agency. The Ancholme Internal Drainage Board maintains 12 pumping stations on the banks of the river, which pump water from the surrounding low-lying land to prevent flooding. The river also supplies large volumes of water to the Scunthorpe Steelworks, and to Anglian Water, who use it to provide a public water supply to the South Humber Bank industrial area. In order to maintain this volume of abstraction during the summer months and other dry periods, water is transferred from Barlingsoe, near the River Whittam, by the Trent-Whittam-Ancholme Transfer Scheme, commissioned in 1974. Few of the bridges which cross the river form part of a public road, and so they have not been replaced to cope with increased traffic. A number of them are listed structures, while Ferriby Lock is a scheduled ancient monument. The river is also home to 2 historic boats owned by the Humber Keel and Amp Sloop Preservation Society. History. In its natural post-glacial state, the river's valley was flat-bottomed. It had formed the bed of the glacial Lake Ancholme, on an outwash delta, as the ice retreated, and consequently was fenny. There is evidence that boats have used the river from early times, for there have been 3 significant archaeological finds of ancient boats. Log boats have been found at Brigg and Appleby, and a planked boat was found at Brigg in 1888. Professor McGrail conducted a re-excavation of the site in 1974, to discover the bottom of a flat-bottomed boat made from oak planks, sewn together and caulked with moss. The boat was thus similar in construction to the Ferriby boats found on the northern shore of the Humber, but was some 500 years younger, being carbon dated to around 800 BCE. Despite suffering from silting as a result of water from the Humber entering it, and passing through land which was often waterlogged on both sides, the Ancholme offered a route into the communities of northern Lincolnshire. Cargo was carried on it from an early date. In 1287 a patent was granted to allow improvements to be made from Bishopbridge to Ferriby. so that boats could more easily carry grain and other commodities on the river as they had done formerly. However, the major concern of the local landowners seems to have been that it should act as an effective drainage channel to prevent inundation of their lands, and between 1289 and 1418 the river was mentioned in the patent rolls 13 times. The need to keep the channel scoured was always mentioned, but often navigation was not. The river was subject to a repeated cycle of concerns being raised, improvements being made, euphoria at the result, and decline through neglect. However, in 1635 Osby-based local landowner Sir John Monson was granted powers to construct a new river for drainage purposes. He removed most of the meanders to create a new straight channel from Bishopbridge to Ferriby. The patent under which the work was carried out was again chiefly concerned with drainage, although there was a requirement to make sure that any new works did not make the river less useful for the passage of boats than it had been for the previous 7 years. At Ferriby, where there had been a bridge since 1312, a sluice was constructed to control the deposition of silt from the Humber. It had 3 arches and 24 doors, but there is no mention of how boats could pass through it. At Brigg, the new channel bypassed the town, but the old channel was also retained, which made the town less vulnerable to flooding. The draining of the Ancholme level was a lesser project among the fenland improvements undertaken under contracts to patentees by the government of Charles I in the 1630s. It was somewhat less brutal than many such projects, for Kennedy states that, with the possible exception of the Ancholme level, the draining of the fens was executed and defended by continuous and unscrupulous use of the power and authority of the royal government to manipulate local institutions and to overawe the local populace. The antiquarian William Stukely visited the river and in 1724 published a report in which he lamented the fact that the sluices below the stately bridge were broken down and lying in dismal ruins by the negligence of the undertakers. Conditions continued to deteriorate, so that in 1766, landowners in the Ancholme floodplain contracted Thomas Yeoman to survey the river. He pointed to the decay of Ferriby sluice, which had resulted in silting of the navigation as far as Glanford, some 8.7 miles above Ferriby. In places the width had been reduced from 40 feet to 15 or 16 feet, which significantly reduced its capacity to cope with flood waters. Above Glanford, lugworm beds, weeds and sandbanks impeded progress, and the final 5 miles to Bishopbridge was completely silted up. Yeoman produced his report on the 17th of September 1766, and an Act of Parliament to authorise improvements to both navigation and drainage was granted on the 20th of May 1767. Development. The Act created commissioners, and John Bennett from Barton upon Humber was appointed clerk. The minutes of the commissioners show that the major concern was with drainage rather than navigation, although the new sluice at Ferriby included a 70 feet by 14.75 feet lock and a house for the lockkeeper. The sluice was built with 3 openings, but the sills were set at a level which was 8 feet above the low water level of spring tides in the Humber, which was not low enough to ensure the drainage of the lowlands in times of flood. The work was completed in 1769. The commissioners gradually realized that navigation might be beneficial, and on the 7th of April 1778 instructed their engineer, Dunderdale, to design a wharf for coal and general goods at Bishopbridge, and to construct a lock at Harlem Hill. No progress was made until the 20th of July 1785, when the commissioners met the proprietors to arrange the purchase of land for the wharf. By this time the engineer had been replaced by Thomas Bradley. The tolls had been leased to Jonathan and John Goodwin for a period of 11 years from 1781. They paid the commissioners £402 per year, and were expected to make good any damage by tides up to the value of £20, although the commissioners would pay for repairs where the cost exceeded £20. The lease expired on 2 July 1792, when the commissioners took back control, and appointed their own collector of tolls. They noticed a disparity in the tolls for coal, caused by the differing sizes of the wagons at various collieries. The collieries mentioned show that coal was arriving from the River Don navigation and the Arun Calder navigation. During the 1790s, the problems of effective drainage worsened, and the commissioners appointed Isaac Leatham from Barton near Malton to produce a comprehensive report with recommendations for the Ancholme level. He addressed the issues of both drainage and navigation, and presented his plans on 29 August 1800. The commissioners thought the projected cost of £22,975 was excessive. They therefore approached John Rennie for a second opinion, and he produced a report on 9 November 1801. His proposals included constructing catchwater drains on either side of the main channel, enlarging the width and depth of the channel, building 2 new locks, and rebuilding the road bridge at Brigg. The cost was estimated to be £53,921, of which only 11% was for improvements to navigation. Again, the commissioners were unhappy with the costs, and although Rennie suggested completing the work in stages, he later produced a modified plan which would only cost £25,413. The commissioners decided to proceed with the revised plan, and a new Act of Parliament was obtained on 26 June 1802. The 2 logs were to be located at Harlem Hill and Kingerby, to improve navigation on the upper section. The Act stipulated that oak mooring posts should be provided at 1-mile intervals, to indicate the distance from Ferriby. Although most of the materials were ordered promptly, the work was hampered by a shortage of finance, and progress was very slow. After the project engineer, Samuel Porter, died in July 1808, the work ground to a halt, and in 1824 Sir John Rennie was asked for advice. He stated that the work specified by his father should be completed. He also recommended that the Ferriby sluice should be reconstructed, with the sills 8 feet lower, and that the capacity of the channel should be doubled, by making it wider and deeper. Finally, a new entrance lock should be built, capable of accommodating boats of 60 tons, and 20 feet wide. Another Act of Parliament followed in 1825, and work began again in 1826. Progress was faster, although there were delays to the drainage works, caused by litigation over the rates that each district should pay towards the project. Several of the existing bridges were constructed of wood, and had multiple openings, which restricted the flow of water through them. They were reconstructed in a variety of styles. Hawkstow Bridge was planned as a cast-iron bridge with an 80-foot span, but was built as a suspension bridge with a span of 130 feet. It is one of the earliest suspension bridges still standing, and the only suspension bridge known to have been designed by Rennie. The bridge at Yarborough Mills, in Brigg, has a single segmental arch built of stone, and was opened in 1827, although it has been widened subsequently. The bridge at Brandy Wharf, which was completed in the following year, is more typical of the structures built at the time, consisting of an iron span with stone abutments. Harlem Hill Lock was reconstructed in 1827, but plans for a second lock at Kingerby were dropped. Discussions had taken place in 1823 about extending the navigation to Market Raisin. The plans were revised and expanded in 1829, by which time a link from Bishopbridge to Barling's-Owen and the River Witham was suggested. It would have cost £90,000 to build the 14-mile waterway, including the construction of 7 locks. Although the scheme was dropped, Rennie was still championing it in 1841 and 1844. Rennie also oversaw the reconstruction of Ferriby Sluice and Lock. An initial meeting with the commissioners was held on the 4th of October 1841. Work began in March 1842, and the cost was estimated to be £16,533. The Earl of Yarborough and Miss Alice Corbett officially opened the new sluice on the 22nd of May 1844. The Earl of Yarborough arranged for his brass band to attend, and he then sailed through the new lock in a schooner. The lock was spanned by a swing bridge cast by the Batley Company, which was in use for 90 years, but was badly damaged in 1934 when a large vessel ran into it. Head Wrightson built the replacement swing bridge in 1935. The navigation became an important route for transporting cargo from the rural communities to the towns of Beverley and Hull in the east. Riding of Yorkshire, William Colton had run a packet boat between Brigg and Hull since 1793, and in 1823 he began operating a steam packet boat. It left Brigg at 7 a.m. each day, arriving in Hull 10:30. The return journey left Hull at 3 p.m., and was timetabled to connect with a coach service from Brigg to Lincoln. From October 1856 the service was run by the Hull, Ferriby Sluice and Brigg Steam Packet Company, formed by a group of farmers who lived between Brigg and Ferriby Sluice. For many years, the tolls on the navigation were leased, and the value of the lease steadily increased, from £402 in the 1780s to £950 in 1828, and had reached £1,857 per year for the period from 1843 to 1845. For the following 3 years it was £3,020, but it then declined, as railways arrived in the area. Brigg Railway Station opened on the 1st of November 1848, and the line from there to Gainsborough Central followed on the 2nd of April 1849. Tolls reduced, falling to £949 in 1850, and to £700 by the late 1850s. After 30 years, trade revived a little, with the tolls reaching £1,000 in the 1890s. It was further boosted by the development of the sugar beet industry in the 1930s, with tolls averaging £1,294 in the late 1930s. Bishopbridge, where there was a basin, 2 corn mills and warehousing, acted as a distribution and collection centre for the farms and villages of that part of Lincolnshire, but by the 1970s commercial traffic had ceased except between Ferriby and Brigg, where there were factories along the river bank. All commercial traffic had ceased by the 1980s. Some development continued, with Snitterby Bridge reconstructed in 1872, Hibblestow in 1889 and Cadney in 1892. In 1977, Ian Horsley formed the River Ancholme Navigation Trust, and in 1978 proposed upgrading of the upper section to Bishopbridge. His grand plans included the construction of 3 new locks on the River Race, to link to Middle Raisin and Market Raisin. By the early 1980s, the scheme had grown to include further links to Horncastle and the Foss Dyke, thus creating a northern Lincolnshire waterways network, but the area was too sparsely populated for such ambitious plans to succeed. The trust was registered in 1979, and ceased to exist in 2009. By the 1980s, the section above Harlem Hill Lock was almost derelict. Rennie's original lock had been reconstructed with a top guillotine gate at some point, and repairs to the lock were attempted in 1993. Although they were not successful, the top gate was subsequently replaced by conventional mitre gates. The Inland Waterways Association campaigned for the restoration of Harlem Hill Lock, raising funds to assist this, and the Environment Agency completed dredging and restoration of the upper section in 2004. The restoration was funded by a grant of £100,000, the first successful bid for funds by the Lincolnshire Waterways Partnership. The work included the provision of new 48-hour visitor moorings at Bishopbridge, with portage points for canoeists nearby and at Harlem Hill Lock. The lock at South Ferriby, which allows boats to leave the river and enter the Humber, is a tide lock, with 4 sets of gates, 2 for use when the tidal Humber is at a higher level than the river, and 2 for when it is lower. For the Humber, a vessel can access many other major waterways leading to the larger towns of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, as well as to the North Sea. Because the river acts as a drainage channel for the Ancholme level, water levels and flow rates are subject to rapid change, and all navigation can be suspended after heavy rain when the sluices are opened to prevent flooding. Organisation responsibility for the river and the flood defences of the surrounding countryside changed several times during the 20th century. Under the Land Drainage Act 1930, 47 catchment areas were defined, covering many of the river systems of England and Wales, including the Ancholme and Winterton Beck catchment area. A catchment board had been set up to manage the area by November 1931. The Catchment Board was replaced by the Lincolnshire River Board following the passing of the River Boards Act 1948, and the new board also had responsibility for the River Welland, the River Whitman and the Steeping River. Land drainage functions became the responsibility of the Ancholme Internal Drainage Board from 1951. This was formed under the terms of the Land Drainage Act 1930, and manages an area of 68.77 square miles containing 119 miles of maintained watercourses. Around half of the water falling on this area has to be pumped into the River Ancholme, because the land is too low-lying to allow gravity drainage. The IDB maintains 12 pumping stations on the banks of the river. Responsibility for the river changed again with the passing of the Water Resources Act 1963. The River Board was replaced by the Lincolnshire River Authority, although the geographical area which it managed was similar. This in turn became part of Anglian Water following the passing of the Water Act 1973. When the regional water authorities were privatised under the terms of the Water Act 1989, management of rivers, including the Ancholme, passed to the National Rivers Authority. Finally, the NRA was subsumed into the Environment Agency in 1996. Recreation. In addition to its function as a land drainage channel and for water supply, the river is also used for recreation. The waterway is managed by the Environment Agency, which requires all vessels to be registered and in possession of an up-to-date license. There are over 200 boats registered, and there are moorings at Ferriby, Brigg, Brandy Wharf and Bishopbridge. Access to and from the Humber is restricted by extensive mud banks to the north of Ferriby Sluice, which are exposed at low tide. Passage through South Ferriby Lock is therefore limited to 3 hours either side of high tide. The river is large enough to support small barges and medium-sized cabin cruisers. South Ferriby Lock is 68 by 18 feet with a draft of 4 feet 11 inches. Harlem Hill Lock is smaller at 60 by 16 feet, but the effective maximum length of boats is 40 feet, as there is nowhere above the lock to turn a longer boat. Small boats can be launched from a slipway at Brandy Wharf Leisure Park on the western bank of the river. The river is a popular venue for rowing, kayaking and canoeing. The Ancholme Rowing Club is based in Brigg, and caters for rowers of all abilities. It encourages junior membership, offers tuition, and organises 2 major events each year. The Ancholme Head Race covers a 2,750-metre course, with open, women's, juniors, mixed and masters categories, and is affiliated to British Rowing. The Scrumpy Row has a more social orientation, and covers 6 miles from Brigg to Brandy Wharf. The Environment Agency work with the club to support competitive and recreational rowing. The agency also have an agreement with the British Canoe Union, allowing the members to use the river. There are a number of small sailing yachts on the river, and the slipway at Brandy Wharf has encouraged this kind of use. The river is well stocked with fish, and provides high-class course fishing. There are organised competitions each year, including winter match angling, which attract anglers from Lincolnshire, South Yorkshire and other local counties. The river is also popular with walkers, having a towpath along its entire length, and there are a number of rights-of-way associated with the river. The Ancholme has a marina at Brigg and another at South Ferriby, which has a chandlery and boat-building facilities. Around 3/4 of the boats that use the river are sea-going vessels, as it provides easy access to the North Sea via the Humber. Water supply. During the late 1960s, there was increasing demand for water, particularly within the South Humber Bank industrial area. Extractions from the underlying chalk aquifer could not be increased, and so the demand was met by building the Trent-Ancholme transfer scheme, which was commissioned in 1974. A pumping station at Short Ferry on Barlingzhoe, near its junction with the River Whittam, pumps water through 10.6 miles of pipeline to a reservoir at Toft Newton, which covers an area of 41 acres. During the summer months and other dry periods, water is released from the reservoir into the Ancholme to augment its flow and maintain its level. In the event of failure of the pumps at Short Ferry, the reservoir has enough capacity to maintain flows in the Ancholme for up to 7 days. There is another pumping station at Torksey, on the River Trent, and in the event of low flows on the Whittam, water is pumped from the Trent into the Foss Dyke, from where it flows eastwards to Lincoln and the River Whittam system. In 1996, removal of some 37,698 megalitres per year from the river was covered by abstraction licenses. Major holders of licenses included British Steel plc, Centrica and Anglian Water. British Steel take water for the Scunthorpe Steelworks from a pumping station immediately to the north of Wallaby Railway Bridge. Centrica run the Glanford Brigg Power Station, located on the west bank of the river near Brigg. It is a gas-fired generating station, capable of producing 240 megawatts from 6 turbines. Water is taken from the river to supplement cooling water lost by evaporation, and some of the cooling water is discharged to the river to prevent a build-up of suspended and dissolved solids. Water is also processed by a treatment plant, where it is filtered and ion-exchanged to provide a clean supply for the boilers, which will not cause scaling or corrosion. Like the cooling water, the boiler feed water is also purged regularly to prevent dissolved solids building up. The largest abstractor is Anglian Water, who maintain a pumping station on the east bank of the river by Cadney Bridge. They were licensed to remove 31,000 megalitres per year in 1996, which is about 82% of the total abstraction. After initial grit removal and chlorination, water is pumped for 1.2 miles through twin 5.9-FOOT diameter concrete pipelines to Cadney Reservoir, which can hold 900 megalitres, covers 35 acres, and has a maximum depth of 36 feet. After further chlorination, the water is pumped for another 6.2 miles through a 4.0-FOOT diameter steel pipeline to Ancholme Water Treatment Works, which produces up to 30 megalitres per day of potable water for public water supply. In addition to supporting these abstractions, the use of water from the TWA scheme has other benefits, because the flow is maintained even in dry weather. Eutrophication, which is caused by a build-up of nutrients in the water, is reduced, and the flow through Ferriby sluice also helps to prevent the ingress of salt water from the Humber into the river. The volume of water transferred via the TWA scheme depends on the weather conditions. In 1987 it was 2,425 megalitres, while in 1979 it was 17,425 megalitres.